Biggest regret?
I don't have regrets, just learnings.
So many lessons in that, right? Pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, having the courage.
I think I took some kind of risks and moved when I needed to. I look back and think, thank God I did, because it would have been much easier not to.
Lynda, welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
It's great to have you.
Exciting.
Yeah, very good. And look, obviously, as we've prepped for this, one of the things that really came to light was your, I guess you could say, less than conventional route into the leadership role that you now have. So kind of tell us, did you always imagine that you would be in a leadership position right from the start of your career?
I'm not sure there is a specific linear path, but no, I guess not. I don't think I ever sat there and thought, I'm going to work in payments, let alone in leadership. It just kind of happened. But naturally, I think if I look back, so one of my first jobs was a waitress, actually, and probably naturally always kind of stepped in to help fix problems and to do things. So if I look back, I can probably see it come, like it was coming.
Right.
But equally probably didn't sit there and think, I'm going to be a leader one day. I didn't really even know what that meant, most likely, at that point in time. So I do remember a story my mum tells sometimes. And so I grew up with a blind father.
Oh, right.
So he went blind when he was 20. One of the stories that she tells, and I obviously don't really remember this, was that when I was 3 years old, I would sit in his, he had this backpack thing to carry me in and guide him. So I would talk to him about, watch the curb, do this, do that, watch that.
Wow.
Now, I don't think that's a normal 3-year-old behaviour looking back. So maybe that was my training.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
And I was thinking about that as we were kind of looking at the questions and things, and I think, it's probably a normal 3-year-old behaviour. I don't remember any of my 3-year-olds doing that, but to me it was normal to do that. And I remember as we were growing up always directing, and one time I really got it wrong and he did fall over a tree stump and smash his face. But we don't always get everything right. But maybe, there's kind of things throughout our pasts that define what we'll become in the end.
And how did you see that start to manifest as you kind of grew into your school years? Did you still spot that trait looking back? My
nan always said I was the I'll do it girl. So apparently I was always kind of, I'll do it, I'll do this. I'm not sure it did me any favours, but it's, I guess, again, looking back, probably I'd naturally always kind of take lead. Maybe it was a bossiness.
Well, isn't that funny? Isn't that funny, though? I think, it can often be mistakenly described as bossiness in children.
I think it's one of the things I actually hate is, actually we tend to call little girls bossy, not little boys. And so I was probably called bossy quite a lot in my past. And now I look back and, it's leadership skills, not bossy.
It's a leader in the making.
Yeah.
So you should encourage those skills.
Yeah, my daughter seems to have got them.
Right. Well, to be honest, I know exactly what you're saying. And you can spot the kids so my 2 kids, I think there's a natural leader in one of them and the other one is probably more passive in that respect, right? But you can see it in some of their day-to-day habits and the traits that you see from a very early age. But it's fascinating to hear that story. And then, so thinking about the start of your career, so obviously you started in a waitress job, and then your first professional role was in recruitment of all places, right? So tell us about that.
Actually, before recruitment, I worked in credit control as well, and I was phoning up builders chasing money that they owed, which was quite interesting.
But clearly you had quite a broad kind of set of experiences right at the start of your career. So let's start there. What kind of drove that? What drove you into those different
I lived
areas?
in Spain between the ages of 14 and 18, 19. And that's where I was waitressing and doing bar work as well as studying. And then when I moved back to the UK, my first ambition wasn't look for a career, it was look for a job, like most 18, 19-year-olds do if they're not in university. And I got a job within a week of moving back, actually, from the UK, because I was just prepared to kind of take any job that came along to start with. And it was working for Howden's Joinery.
Right.
Back then part of MFI. And it was doing credit control.
Okay.
So it was kind of reconciling accounts and phoning up customers to chase money. I think actually that was a really interesting and quite good experience at 18, 19 years old to understand kind of that side of business, understanding how to talk to customers that perhaps in difficult positions.
Right.
And chasing money is not the nicest of jobs.
Of course.
So it kind of gives you that understanding of empathy and how to talk to people and to understand customer problems.
And how to have difficult conversations as well.
Totally, yeah, and pushing yourself out your comfort zone.
Yeah.
After about 6-7 months, I actually found myself in a team leader role there. And I was very young, way too young, really, to be managing people. And it was a team leader rather than a senior manager role. But that was also really interesting, trying to work out how do you manage the dynamics of different people? Naturally, the team were quite young, and so that was interesting. And then I moved more into training and development. I think I've always had that people side of things.
Right.
And if I look at all the roles I've taken, whilst there is kind of a variety, they've always involved some kind of people or leadership or coaching side of things. So yeah, I went into training and development, and that's where I actually started studying again and looking at how to do learning and development effectively, and then randomly went into recruitment, actually.
Okay. So there was obviously a level of ambition there that kept pushing you forward into different roles, even right at the very start of your career, right? So what was driving that back then?
I think back then, a couple of things. I never got to do the university thing for reasons, so just wasn't able to from a family perspective at that point to take a kind of move away and do that. So it just wasn't possible for me, but did love learning and always did pretty well in school.
Right.
So I think part of it was the learning element, which is why I moved around a little bit at the beginning, every couple of years, just to kind of keep challenging myself and keep learning. And I did study through that as well. And that kind of made me want to know more and to do more. Right. So I think that initially drove me. Also, just, I don't know, there's just something in me that makes me do it, which I can't describe. But yeah, there is an element of ambition, but I think it's through always wanting to challenge myself and learn, being really curious. Yeah. I think that still continues now.
Very good. And so just to pick up on the university point for a second, I also didn't go to university, and I often find that I feel disappointed about that, actually. Less so now, I think, but at certain points through my career, I've always kind of worn that as a bit of a chip on the shoulder to a certain extent, just because I feel like I missed out on that part of life, which is a bit, it's somewhat, I guess, naive and a bit wrong, probably. But how about you? How does that feel for you, the fact that you didn't go?
I think a lot of people go now to university. I'd say only probably 50% of the people, maybe less, when I was at school. So I think it wasn't quite as much as it is now. I think the biggest part that I feel that maybe missed out of is more the social and personal side, to be perfectly honest. You can study however you want, whenever you want, and not everybody's life is exactly the same, and things don't always fall into place at the same time. Right. Actually, many friends that I went to school with who did go to university are not doing anything relevant to what they studied. Cool. Because I do think at 18 years old, you're not always, or 17, 18, when you're making those decisions, you're not always ready. And I have two 15-year-olds at the moment, and thinking about they're going to make those decisions in the next couple of years of what they're going to study and perhaps do I don't think they're going to have a clue what they want to do.
That's so true.
So there's two things. Yes, perhaps I missed out on some of the social side. I don't actually regret it. It wasn't a choice for me. So I don't regret that. I think you can study any time in your life. I'm right now doing a positive psychology degree. So you can do it at any time. You don't have to go to university necessarily to do those things. I do think what it does do is, it shows discipline if you come out the other side, and it's good. But I don't think anybody should feel bad for not going. Yeah. And you don't seem to have done too badly for yourself. So, maybe you cannot wear that chip anymore.
Do you know what? It's more of a credibility badge, I suppose. And you're absolutely right. It's probably misplaced, right? But have you ever felt like it's kind of been a barrier to you at any point?
No, I don't think so. Maybe other people have felt that, but and not said. I don't know. Personally, no, I don't feel it has been a barrier. I could have gone to university, in the sense of an educational perspective, but I did. By the time I was 21, 22, and people were coming out of university, I'd worked since I was 16. I did study between 16 and 18 too, but had been working since then, from 18 to 22 in fairly decent jobs, actually. And by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was managing teams. So I don't necessarily think it did me any harm not doing it, because I think if you put in the work and you're ambitious and your mindset is right, I don't think it makes too much difference, actually, unless you're going down a certain road. If you want to be a nurse, a teacher, of course you need to go to university to do those things. You can't just learn them on the job necessarily. Although my mum would argue a nurse can be learned on the job, because that's what she did in her day. But, not everyone has the same opportunities. And I'd hate for people to think that was the only route, because it's absolutely not the only route. And, my children may go to university. I think one of them definitely will. But the other, I'm not sure it's right for him anyway, because we learn in different ways.
Of course.
And it's not always good for everybody.
That's so true. Yeah. I completely subscribe to that way of thinking. It's really interesting when I think about our business. We, at the start, we specifically looked for people that weren't graduates. We kind of thought that it was a good thing to do, bring people into career, coach them, train them, develop them. We did actually find that quite challenging, because I think what you find, especially when you're looking at kind of first or second jobbers, is there's probably less of less discipline, potentially a lack of maturity there on occasion. So then we reverted the other way into purely focusing on graduates. Now we've got a much more balanced view, and I think that is actually the right thing. But you do find, what we found anyway at the beginning was, if people have been to university and they've been through that process, they do generally have a little bit more of a disciplined approach than maybe people that are coming into the working environment for their first time. Whereas if you look at second
and potentially
jobbers,
probably a little bit older.
Yeah, if you look at second jobbers, it's different though, right?
So I challenge my company and all the companies I've worked for. It says degree in X. I'm like, but why? Why do you need that? Now, I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but if someone holds 4 or 5 years of experience kind of grafting and getting the knowledge that equals that person's always more than, why?
For sure.
So to me, it's not about, education is very important, but for me, it's about how kind of someone is inside themselves and how pushy they are to succeed, and they're curious. And if you're curious, you'll go and learn anyway.
So then going back to your early career, so you've kind of pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone a few times already, and you've got into your kind of recruitment role, which is, I guess, an industry that really favours people instincts and results.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Like, I was young, it was fun. So I worked for Hayes, who were incredible at training people, actually. And I still speak to quite a lot of the people who I worked with there. And some of them are still there 20 odd years later, which is amazing, really. It was a really good learning ground for me, because I think I learned how to connect with people. I'm not a natural kind of cold caller, seller type person. So that felt incredibly uncomfortable to be, you've got to do X amount of calls a week and a month. And because it is numbers driven, right? Those types of roles, because it wasn't headhunting, it was office, admin, support, recruitment. So it was kind of quite high volume. But the way I wanted to do it was slightly different, and just connect with people and make relationships. And actually, in the long term, that worked. So I'd do the calls, but do them in a way of, how can I add value to that person, as opposed to, do you have any jobs that you need filling? And I really enjoyed it. I think I was there about 6 years in total.
Wow, okay.
So it wasn't kind of in and out. I was there for 6 years. I ended up running a couple of offices while I was there, and managing people. Because again, somehow, not planned, but you naturally end up in those positions.
Yeah.
And actually, it was the first what I'd class as more management job. I'd done team leading before, which was a bit different because that was more kind of just on the day-to-day stuff.
Course.
But managing, and I managed them through the recession in 2008 and had to make some really difficult decisions in that time. And also, one of the things at the time is I was only probably in my mid-late 20s at the time. And a lot of the people I was managing were older, men. And it was quite difficult to step into that role. And I remember having some conversations with people, which now I look back and think, goodness, like how I did that at that point in time. But it was a really good learning in how not to do things as well as how to do things.
Okay, very interesting. But the key takeaway for you was the kind of the relationship first approach to people. Yeah.
Like, how are you actually adding value to somebody?
Beyond the transaction at hand. Very interesting. And then so talk to us about how you then moved out of that, because there's clearly a career path there that set you in a specific direction, right? So what happened next?
I had kids.
Right.
And recruitment, I'd been doing it for 6 years even, and it's full on. And I kind of... So one of my clients was Barclaycard.
Right.
I recruited a lot for them, and they had some openings, and my life had changed with having kids. And I thought the good thing would be to take a bit of a break. I felt quite burned out. And I'd had twins as well. Right. So like life was burning me out as well as work. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mum. And I'm just going to work evenings. At Barclaycard, they had a job which I was in, and it was relatively easy, answering the phones to merchants that had problems with their payment devices. And I thought that would do me for a few years.
Yeah.
It lasted 3 months. Not the job. I was still allowed to be in the job, but my own kind of ability to do it. I ended up starting my own business at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Only on the side, nothing serious, but making baby gifts, because I was just, my brain just didn't operate in that way. But I think as a mum, a new mum, and this was quite some time ago, I felt guilty for working a little bit as well. So, and I think a lot of parents and mums in particular go through that process of, you know, I'm going to be away all day, they're going to be in nursery, as well as balancing costs of that and just, you know, being away all the time.
Yeah.
So I made the decision to stay at home, and then quickly realised that wasn't actually the right decision at all for me.
Right.
And I was operating under guilt probably, which we do.
Yes.
But so after 3 or 4 months, I went to the managers of the department and said, look, I'm sorry, I just can't do this. I need to go back to something more challenging and daytime work. Yeah. And they offered me a job inside Barclaycard in the day, which was great. And I did that for a few years, and kind of that's how this journey started. Yeah.
Very interesting.
For 15 years now in payments. So, yeah.
But so there's something in that though, isn't there? So you've got this kind of this burning desire just constantly to do more and push yourself, right? So even when you've got 2 young children, twins, that must be a pretty intense environment to be in, right?
Well, it's probably easier to go to work. That's what I thought. You know, hats off to stay-at-home mums. I have to say, it was not for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
but what drives that, do you think?
I've always been someone who wanted to be quite independent, I suppose. And I think the internal driver within me is, and I say this to my kids all the time, work hard to give you choices. Doesn't really matter what you do, but have choices. And I think that's always in the back of my head, is work hard to have choices. And I think that's probably the internal driver in me.
Of course, yeah. Interesting. And then, so you've seen through your career how that manifests and pays off. I think it's very difficult to think in those terms when you're at the start of your career sometimes, right?
Of course, yeah.
But I always find it quite funny because when you are at the start of your career, you've probably got less responsibilities and more opportunity to work really, 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 really hard. And therefore, by doing that later in your career, you have many more options when you've probably got a little bit more money, you're a little bit more comfortable, and you've got more options to spend your money on, right, than potentially you have at the start of your career. Most people I find have just got that back to front a little bit.
I think when you're younger, you just don't appreciate the things that are ahead of you. You can't even imagine it. And I think that's why it's back to front. And actually, there's so many things I'd go back and do differently now, of course, but that's what life is about, right?
Of course. And would you have, so at this point in your career, once you're in Barclaycard, would you have made different career choices by that stage in your career, do you think?
No, I don't think I would have. No, I don't think I would have, because I wouldn't be where I was now if I hadn't taken some of those things. I intentionally kept my experience fairly broad across, obviously I've been in payments for 15 years, but broad, because I don't think you can operate as a GM or a CEO if you haven't got an understanding more broadly of how things work. But no, I don't think I'd change anything. I think I took some kind of risks and moved when I needed to. I look back and think, thank God I did, because it would have been much easier not to.
Of course. Yeah, so it's a trend, it's a theme as you look at your kind of experience and background, right?
Yeah.
But so also, you know, you're going into full-time work, into a new environment with twins at home as a new mother. That must have been a difficult period, the reality of that.
I think I've blacked it out. Just having twins for the first year, any twin mums, or like I have a friend who has triplets. We both say, you know, we just basically just black it out. Like, generally, the hardest thing about going back to work, even though you know it's absolutely what you need to do and it makes me a better person for having that, it's just the guilt. And I still have that now, you know, the guilt is there because you feel culturally we're kind of molded in a certain way,
of course,
and you feel that you should be at home doing this, that, and that the children miss out. They're not necessarily. I think you can create a balance. It's just not always easy, and you have to remember the guilt's normal and not dwell in it and just accept it and carry on.
And do you feel like you had to make sacrifices professionally?
Both, as
well as personally?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I remember when I worked at Elevon. And it's not really, I don't feel they're sacrifices. They're just things that you have to think about differently.
Yeah.
So when I was at Elevon, I had 3 kids at the time, and one of them was only, I think, 1, 2. And then the twins, who were a little bit older at that point. And I was on a executive management training program, and we were in Atlanta or Knoxville, somewhere in the States. And I then had to be in Atlanta the following week as well. Most people, and now I look back and think, what on earth were you thinking? Most people stayed over the weekend, so they didn't have to go back and forth.
Right.
I flew back on the Thursday night, or the Friday night. I can't remember exactly the days. Spent the weekend there, and then flew back out on the Monday morning. So they're the types of things that you think about and do slightly differently.
Yeah.
To be a little bit more present. Whether or not that's the right or the wrong thing, I don't know. But that's, you know, they're the types of things that you have to do differently. Or, you know, I'll work a bit strange hours occasionally so I can go and pick the kids up from school or go to the assembly or whatever. You just have to balance it. And you equally need a company that appreciates and understands.
For sure.
And I always say to my team, you know, when they want to do things like this, for me, it's give and take, you know, give and take in equal measures, and it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually the working environment now in most organisations is slightly different, right? It's probably a lot more accepting. It's a lot easier to have that flexibility, would you say?
And I think it should be as well. We live in a time where unless you're specifically clocking in and out because there's a reason you need to, we can work and operate at our own time most of the time and get things done. And I'm more efficient that way, actually.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about that for a moment then. So for me personally, as a founder running the business, one of the things I really struggle with is not necessarily delegating, but having the right teams in place to delegate to. And I find that a constant challenge. So I end up doing things myself, and therefore I end up working the really, really long days, whereas others around me potentially don't do that, and they don't have the same level of pressure. I do find that a challenge, but I assume it's the same. Like in a founder-led environment, that's the same as building teams, right? Before you've got the capability in place, you have to kind of go the extra mile yourself. How do you get to the point where you've got that capability around you, where you can start to push stuff off, and then you can have the flexibility yourself?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let's go back to that. Why do you think it is? Why do you struggle to delegate? Why do you think that people can't handle that?
Most of the time, it's because everything's urgent, and there's a coaching kind of arc that you need to take people through to get to them to the point where they can do the stuff autonomously. And those two things are almost counterintuitive to one another, right? You want to push things out really, really quickly. And you kind of look at the option to go, right, I can get somebody else to support me with this, but I know I'm going to have to invest that time into getting them up that curve. And that is a dichotomy. So that's my challenge. I think in reality, what I'd ideally like is capability that sits in the middle, that can help to do the coaching and get the people up the curve. And I think that's what any manager is probably building towards, but doesn't always have the luxury of having.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a perfect answer to that. The answer really is you have to put in the work to get them where you need to get them in the first place. Right?
It's true.
But I often find that we don't delegate because we don't want to lose control. We're not 100% courageous enough to let it go. And sometimes it goes wrong. But sometimes you have to let people do it and fail to be able to teach them also. So when I'm in those situations, I tend to ask myself, am I not delegating because I don't trust the team? Or I feel like I need to take control of this because I can't deal with it if it goes wrong? Rarely are the people actually not capable of doing it. Yeah. It just takes a little bit more time for them to do it. And, is it urgent, really, really urgent? Or is it urgent just because you want it done quickly?
It's a really good challenge, right?
Because as a founder or someone that's leading the business, your priorities are perhaps different to other people's. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves that these things are urgent, and they're not always as urgent. I guess the answer is different depending on what the task is that you're trying to delegate and the team.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to use this as a bit of a coaching exercise then, if I may. Okay. So I'll share with you a real life example that's happening right now. So there is a need to get some documentation out to a client very quickly. That task was delegated, but the quality level that it came back at was kind of 60 to 70% of the way there. Now there's a real urgent need to get this documentation done as quickly as possible. My natural thing, therefore, is to jump in and go, right, I've fed back once, we've got it to a point. They kind of understand what the gaps are, but to get that now to a level that it needs to be, I'm going to actually have to go and show them. I haven't got time to do that right now. I might as well do it myself. How do you deal with that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, there's the textbook answer versus the reality of what I would probably do.
I'm keen for both.
So one of the things I always ask myself when someone doesn't give me what I thought they were going to give me in the first place is, did I actually paint what it actually should have looked like properly in the first place? Were they aware of what was in my head? Because just because I say, by the way, I need this documentation, do they actually understand what good looks like?
Such a good point.
And not perfection looks like, because perfection is something that I wouldn't try and aim for, but what good looks like.
So how do you actually do that practically?
Tell them at the beginning, this is what, have you got an example of it before? Or, it needs to make sure it be very specific. And I think half the time when people don't succeed is because we don't actually tell them what success looks like. No, I'm not saying you didn't do that. You'll have to question that yourself.
I'll take it, yeah.
But, if you're giving something to someone and they don't truly understand what done looks like, like we used to have in product the definition of done, and I used to get so kind of focused on it because people had different interpretations. You could have asked all the 5 different people working on the same project what done looked like. They'd all have a slightly different version of that.
Right, yeah.
So if you don't define what done is and what good is, then I think that's step number 1. And when it does come back, now, ideally, we'd all have time to say, like, this is now what needs to happen, because this isn't what done is, or this is what done looked like, and this is where you are, and you're 60% there, and these are the gaps, and push it back to them to do it. In an ideal world, we'd go back and forth in that until, and coaching them through it, right?
Yeah.
If you can't, fine. If you have to do it, you have to do it. If there's a deadline tomorrow, like I do understand that. And practicality versus textbook, they're different things. But then you need to go back and show them what you did.
Once you have the time,
Because next time they need to understand. Because also putting yourself in their position, they don't want to fail and only do 60, 70%. They want to be able to do it. You owe them the coaching to make sure that they do it.
That's so true, I think everybody wants to do a good job, right?
Of course, I don't believe anyone really goes into anything thinking, you know what, I'm just going to do it 60% well.
Yeah, it's the whole kind of Daniel Pink philosophy, though, isn't it? I think people do need autonomy to a certain extent. Otherwise, they're going to feel unfulfilled. And I see that regularly. People that have got bags of talent, but maybe don't reach their full potential because they don't have enough clarity around what that actually looks like in their day to day or week to week, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people lack clarity in feedback as well. So a lot of the time I see people giving feedback meaning very well, but actually they're not clear enough. They're not clear enough about what needs to change and what needs to happen. And I think that's often where people you can give feedback and they don't really understand what it is that you're talking about.
Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of the time people make themselves feel more comfortable but not being clear enough. So if you're giving feedback and it can be, it's more negative feedback, it can be really uncomfortable for the person giving the feedback. And instead of putting themselves in an uncomfortable position, giving the feedback, which is going to benefit the other person, they make themselves feel more comfortable by just giving a little bit of a kind of push of the feedback, but it's not specific enough.
That resonates with me 100%. How do you deal with that?
Just accept that it's better for me to be uncomfortable, but them to understand what I'm talking about. The discomfort in reality lasts several seconds as well. We can all handle several seconds of discomfort on behalf of somebody else. I usually also set it up of, this is going to be a little bit uncomfortable for me to tell you, because as soon as you say it, it's kind of, okay, they're expecting you to say something now anyway. Or, I don't necessarily like to have these conversations, but I feel that it's my job to make sure you know this.
Yeah.
So they know that what you're doing is for them and not for you.
There's some human psychology in that as well. If you set a conversation up to say, this is going to be tough, people are automatically thinking, oh no. And then whatever comes after that is probably going to be easier.
And as long as they know you're doing it with the very best intentions, be kind when you're giving negative feedback. You don't need to throw them under a bus or be really negative and harsh to people. You can land your message in a way that is that. But I think and I actually was speaking to someone at an event just last week, and she came and asked me afterwards, I was speaking on a panel, and she came and asked me afterwards, I've just stepped into a team leader position and my team, they're not doing everything I need them to do. I said, so how are you managing that? Well, I'm thinking about, do I need to change things around? I'm like, have you actually had the conversation with them? She's like, oh, no, I'm a bit afraid of doing that. And that's part of it. The fear of putting yourself in an uncomfortable position, I think, stops us having those conversations that actually I'd prefer, if I was on the other side of it, someone just to tell me.
Yeah.
I might not like it.
Yeah.
But it exists whether you know it or not.
No, that's so true. And how do you see that materializing with the person that you're giving feedback to? What's the net result there? Obviously, they take the learnings, probably, because you've given them more clear feedback. Do you see any other indirect impact of that?
I think it depends how open the person is to to learning too, because they also have to be open to taking the feedback. I find most of my team and most of the people I've ever had these conversations with, they don't like necessarily what they're hearing, but not because you're telling them it, just because it's not always easy to receive that. But actually when they process it, I don't think I've ever had any really negative feedback from that at all. Most people want to do better. Most people appreciate when you're honest with them.
Yeah.
And as long as you do it in the right way, I haven't seen anything negative come from it.
Do you know, there's an observation that I've had here, which is that sometimes female leaders that are giving direct feedback it's perceived differently to a male leader giving the same direct feedback. And I think I've heard so many times talking to people, I loved working with this person because they were so honest with me and they drove me hard, but actually they taught me a lot and I learned a lot. But I do find, I've seen several examples of this, where a female can say exactly the same thing, but it's just taken in a slightly different way. Does that resonate with you at all?
Totally, yeah. I think there are advantages of being female.
Yeah.
There's reasons behind that just from kind of psychology and how we're brought up and the traits that men represent versus women.
Yeah.
I think women are often seen to be kind of more empathetic, understanding. It's not necessarily true, by the way. This is just a perception of if you look at women versus men.
Of course.
So I think there's that in it. And I think sometimes they do demonstrate more empathy naturally.
Yeah.
However, I think it depends, because women to women is a different thing to a woman to a man or man to man. And sometimes I think male egos can also bump in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you have someone that's they find it harder to hear feedback.
Yeah.
When a woman gives it, they perhaps just are more open to listening. That's all. But actually, I've had that myself where there was somebody in a role, I'm not going to go into detail on name, whereas a lot of people found it really hard to get through to them. It's not the right idea, a right way of saying it, but to land messages with them, whereas I didn't. And now I actually think being female helped me in that respect. It wasn't the only thing, but I think that helped.
Yeah. Interesting. And so I just want to take it back a step, because in the exercise you talked about, at a certain point you need to be able to demonstrate what good looks like, right? So what is your kind of relationship with playbooks, having everything documented to a degree where it's almost like the process that you follow in different parts of the job is incredibly formulaic? How does that resonate with you?
There are certain roles where that has to happen.
Yeah.
I'm from an operational background as well, and product, and you need to have lots of documentation, and I'm regulated, so there's that there. Right? So of course I follow those things where I want to make sure we have the right documentation, but I'm not too formal. I don't really mind about the rest of it. I don't think you need to have process after process after process. I think it's very individual. I think that question depends on what you're talking about. I am quite methodical in the way I think, maybe too sometimes, and I do find that I like to have things written down and process and plans and so on. I think that sometimes that helps, and then sometimes I write it to start with and then I'll probably never open it again. So it's probably just more the way my brain likes to formulate things. I love lists, but it doesn't mean I look at them again. I think to get it out of me, it's just you have to write it down. Yeah.
Well, there's two schools of thought on this, isn't there? And that's why I asked the question, because, often when you are building something or you're developing a team, you're developing individuals, like you say, it's always really helpful to have that playbook sitting there that you can point them to say, right, this is what good looks like.
But I think that's so individual.
Exactly. I agree. I think you need to let people almost find their own way. You show them the template at least.
Yeah, and also I don't think you can template that yourself. So they're two slightly different questions. So the one you mentioned about showing what good looks like on a document that you have in your head that you need them to understand from your head is slightly different to how do you move a company and how do you create a team and and so on. And actually the way I do that is by engaging with all of that team, and we create that plan together, not just me individually, because I think every company and team are different. So using those brains and everyone's perspectives, I think actually helps me formulate the plan. I do have a bit of a methodology, I suppose, but that's different to having a kind of fixated process. You go in, you listen, you learn, you absorb everything, and just try not to do too much in the first part of when you join a company or take a new role. That doesn't mean don't make any decisions if there's urgent things that need to be done.
Yeah.
But overall, don't decide on the structure and the strategy and everything else for the first little while, because you don't know anything about this business and what's under the hood, as they say. So I make lots of assumptions, fine, but put a pin in them all. And then take the pin out a little while later, and is that assumption still true? Is it not? And move on, and use the team around you. And if they're not the right team, get the right team. Make sure you've got the right people around you to help you make those decisions, and use the team in that way. I think that's kind of my methodology for going in and doing it. Just absorb for a while before.
Yeah. Okay. And final point on this, because I'm really keen to dig into the kind of Nayax experience as well, and where you are now. But could you maybe give us an overview? What do you see your role as a leader, as a general manager? What do you hold yourself accountable for?
I see it a couple of ways. Obviously, the company need me to make sure revenue is protected and there. So that's, of course, to hit the performance objectives that are set by the company. We're a listed business, so I want to make sure that's there. But also to make sure we do it in the right way. And that's really important to me. So putting the customers at the centre of everything that we do. We're regulated as well, so we make sure that everything is done in the right way, and that's really, really important to me. And also to be an advocate to my team, so advocate them, if you like. So I see it as serving them, making sure that they are able to perform their jobs, because actually they are the best ones at doing all of this, not me. Yeah. What I do is I provide that kind of buffer into the bigger picture of the organisation, fight for them, but equally communicate down and make sure that everybody understands what's going on in the bigger global picture. And really just to serve them, to make sure that we can protect our customer base, our revenue, and be the best that we can be for the customers.
Very cool. Sounds like a fantastic position to be in, right?
That's not necessarily how it works on a daily basis, but that's how I generally see my role. If I was to describe what my role is, it's not the general manager of the UK office. It's actually, I'm that person that helps them do their jobs on a daily basis to deliver what we need to do for the wider company.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I once had somebody say to me that actually people talk about customer first or colleague first. It should always be customer first, because if you're customer first, then it creates the environment where colleagues have things that they can go after. They've got clear objectives, direction, things that they can do to make the customer's life better. I don't know where I stand on that. What are your thoughts?
It's really interesting. I kind of understand the theory, but I think if you have the right people and you treat your colleagues well, they'll go the extra mile for the customer. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg. I'd say people first. Yeah,
and I also think it depends on where you're at in terms of maturity, right? Because sometimes it needs to be revenue focused, and therefore it should be customer first, and everyone has to put in that extra bit of effort. But generally,
people aren't going to put in the effort if you don't have the right colleagues in the first place.
Exactly. So, if you haven't created the right culture.
Yeah. So I kind of am a bit in between on them. I'm not sure there's a perfect answer.
Yeah.
We put the customers at the heart of everything we do because my colleagues want to.
Yeah.
Right? Because they truly believe it.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important. And I think people first, right? Customers are people, employees are people.
Very true.
So people first. Yeah. And how do we make sure all the people within our business are happy?
For sure, that really resonates. Do you know, in our industry, I think a lot of the search firms that we see out there and consulting firms that we see out there, they are very transactional in terms of the way they operate, and their incentive model is transactional, and that drives a certain kind of type of behavior when they're engaging with their candidates, clients, whoever. And I just feel like for people businesses, they miss the people aspect and the relationship aspect, and we win because of that, because it's just a mindset thing, right?
I think that's a cultural and a value that you have to make sure. So when you're hiring people, make sure that they fit within your values. And that's really, really important. You could say that the same about a lot of businesses that are in, commercial businesses,
For sure.
not necessarily so much service businesses, but commercial businesses, we have numbers to hit. We have financial KPIs that purely we're tracked on, really. But I know, and Nayax know, that that's not actually how you get it. So that's your overall kind of objective, if you like. But actually underneath that, to hit that, there are so many things you have to do to win. And having the right values and setting up the right culture and being people first is really important. And at the end of the day, that's what sustainable revenue comes from.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sustainable growth, and it's more enjoyable.
Yeah, of course.
That's the most important thing. So let's talk about Nayax for a moment. So what attracted you into the organization in the first instance?
I think it's a very interesting company. I'd known Nayax from being in payments, but I didn't ever see them as a payments business, funnily enough. I saw them more as a hardware business selling. So for those who don't know, they sell predominantly unattended payment devices. So if you walk through Heathrow Airport, for example, and look at all the vending machines, you will see lots of Nayaxes everywhere. And actually, as soon as you start looking, you see them everywhere.
Of course, yeah, I've seen it.
Literally everywhere. So when I started thinking about that, I thought, wow, why don't I know them better? Why aren't they working with these people? And why aren't we doing this? So when the job got presented to me, I was intrigued to understand more on what they're trying to do, and then realizing, wow, they've got some fantastic products that, why don't I know about these? And I really, really bought into the culture and what they're trying to do. And I think for me, that's really important when I'm taking a role. I have to really believe in the company and what they're trying to achieve. So that's what kind of sold it to me. Meeting the CEO and some of the C-suite, I think they're just got a really good team in place, and I love the culture that they're building.
And when you say culture in this respect, how do you see that? How do you actually feel that when you're going and having these conversations?
I think it is the values,
right?
And it is how they're thinking about the business, what their vision is, and how all of that wraps together. The vision is great. So our CEO is actually one of the founders, even 20 years on. And they're NASDAQ-listed now as well. So he's still there. And you can kind of feel that ambition still from him. So what I like, I've worked in big organizations and I've worked in startup scale-up organizations. And what I love about Nayax is it's kind of in between. It is a big corporate organization.
Yeah.
But equally, it's got kind of that culture of still, not startup, but like fast, to move. Entrepreneurial is probably the right word, because of the CEO still there. And I think that that's quite exciting to be part of.
That's really cool.
And
what's your mandate now?
So I'm general manager of the UK and Ireland. So my job, as mentioned earlier, is to protect my customers and make sure that we grow in the best way possible in the UK and Ireland. So I look after everything across the UK and Ireland. So my team are mainly sort of account management, sales, customer facing, but equally, we then have marketing feeding in. We have a kind of global support of everything. So I oversee everything that happens in the UK. So, which is quite exciting.
Broad, multifaceted.
Very broad, but that's what I said at the beginning. If you keep it broad, it doesn't mean you don't go deeper into some of the areas. But if you keep it more broad, now I have a really good understanding of a lot of those areas that I'm operating through.
Of course. Yeah, it's interesting because without having done a general manager role, I suspect it's difficult for most people to understand the kind of breadth of responsibility that is involved with that type of position,
Yeah,
right?
and of course you can learn it, but you don't have the perspective necessarily. So I got quite lucky. I accidentally fell into product when I was at Barclaycard, but it suited me quite well because product is a role where you get involved in lots of different areas of the business because, of course, salespeople need to know how to sell your product. You have to have go-to-market of product. You also get involved technically and operationally and legally and compliance side of all. So actually in product, you start to build that kind of broader knowledge, and then that helps you as you move through.
Cool.
So of course you can go deeper into some areas, but for me personally, I've intentionally tried to keep it learning as many of the different areas as possible. So when I did step into this type of role, I at least have some form of perspective of things.
Okay, and now you're at the position that you're at in your career. How do you continue? How do you continue to develop new skills and continue to learn?
I don't think you can ever know enough. I am so far from perfect. Every day, something crops up. I think being conscious of that is one. Continue to ask for feedback is another, because if you think you're perfect, you're definitely not. I listen to lots of books, which we've talked about before, but I listen to lots of audio bits because I do a lot of driving these days. So I'm listening to those. And just being curious all the time, I think, is really, really important, to continuously be curious.
Yeah.
Some people say nosy. I say curious.
And curiosity, though, it's a funny one, right? Because sometimes it enables you to challenge the status quo, because I think if you're a curious person, you're always questioning why things work that way. But sometimes that can also be damaging as well, right? Because sometimes you just need people to get on and do. How do you deal with that dichotomy? If you're a very curious person, sometimes you can be quite disruptive as well, right?
Yeah, I know, but I think you don't need to be curious about every single thing, just about if it broadens your knowledge.
Yeah. You need to want to know more.
Don't just question for the sake of questioning. Ask questions for the sake of learning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We're putting together a performance framework internally at the moment, and curiosity is one of those things that we're kind of looking how do you measure curiosity in a person, and exceptional curiosity in our book looks like someone that wants to challenge the status quo. And I kind of looked at that in the last few days and thought, well, actually that could also be quite painful, right?
So I think there is a balance, isn't there? Because for me, curiosity is not just about questioning, it's about listening.
Of course. Understanding.
And I think lots of people ask questions just for their own voice to be heard. And actually, if you're asking the right questions and then shutting up and listening, that's to me curiosity. Or you don't even have to ask questions. You might just go, oh, I haven't heard about that before. I'm going to go research that myself.
Of course, yeah. That's what
curiosity.
Yeah.
So, it's not sitting in a meeting and asking 20 questions just for the hell of it. It's intentionally asking the right questions, shutting up, listening, going investigating and researching yourself, and coming back with questions if you still don't really understand.
Yeah. So seeking to understand, not to be understood, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that was said to me earlier in my career, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a communication style, isn't it, as much as anything else? Okay, cool. And so, look, you're where you are now in your career. You've obviously had a fantastic journey into a general manager role. It's the first general manager role, big step, but exciting opportunity. You also clearly got a huge amount of energy, and
have I? Cool. Should tell me
from my
that.
experience of working with you anyway, and clearly you've got that kind of combination of client centricity plus the people skill set, right? So where do you see yourself going in the future from here? What's your kind of long-term plan?
I don't have a long-term plan. I don't really believe in them. It doesn't mean I don't have any thoughts of things. But one of the things I would say is if you plan too much, it might stop you taking opportunities because they don't fit in your plan.
Interesting.
And I've probably, some of the best opportunities I've taken in my career have not been planned. I would have never seen them coming, right? So know what you like, have boundaries around that of what you would do and wouldn't do, but don't have complete plan, because I just think you only end up disappointed. Nothing ever goes to plan. What I like doing, so I love what I'm doing right now. I'll always be working with people. I know that. I love, but the passion side that I have as well on the side is more coaching side of things. I'm really into supporting women, not just in payments, but in careers in general, because I think I've lived and breathed it. I have 4 children. I've had to build a career from nothing. I've gone through those painful steps that people have to go through. I've kind of navigated it and learned a lot on the way. So I'd like to use that more formally as well at points.
Very cool. And does that include like a coaching career, do you think, at a certain point?
Yes. Coaching, supporting, training, running workshops, that type of thing is kind of what my aspiration would be in that. I'm studying positive psychology at the moment, which is also a coaching element. So that's really interesting to see how I can apply that into my own journey also.
And so just on that for a moment, I think, often leaders find people management, people development, the hardest part of the job.
It's because people are so strange.
Right.
We're all unique.
Everybody's different, right? So what's the secret?
What, with people or just leadership in general?
Well, both. Let's go both.
So from a people, I think connection is really important. So to get anybody, support anybody, to get anybody realizing feedback, when I think it's about connection. And the number one for connection is really empathy, not sympathy, empathy. And being able to reach out to people in that way and connect with someone. So I think the secret to that is connection. And I think not enough people spend enough time doing that. It's not telling someone what to do, it's connecting with them so they're able to understand.
Building trust.
Trust is an element of it. But trust comes out of that connecting in the first place.
How do you connect?
You have to have empathy with situations, right? And you have to have real, honest conversations. So going back to those feedback conversations, how do I build trust in my team? Ultimately, I connect with the team. How do you connect with them? You have to have open and honest conversations, where they build gradually that connection with you. And as soon as you have empathy with someone, there is a connection there. Because empathy is feeling what they feel. Not exactly, but being able to kind of understand why that's happening and they feel that way.
It makes so much sense. But I think it's really difficult to do in practice, right?
But everybody can practice it. But you have to be intentional about it, because too often we're not willing to get uncomfortable ourselves to take on the connection empathy piece. So it's easier for us to almost brush it off. I'm so sorry that's happening to you. That's not empathy, that's sympathy. Right? That's not understanding a situation and reacting to it. I think emotional intelligence is really, really important. So to make sure that we're focusing on that. And then from a leadership side, I think it's courage. I think number one for me is courage from a value, because it underpins so many things, having those conversations, being vulnerable at times, because being vulnerable yourself can allow connection also with people. And so many times I think people see these things as negative to leadership, but actually I believe it's completely the reverse. And the more human you are, the more vulnerable you are, with boundaries, of course. I think makes you a better leader and makes you be able to connect with people far better.
Do you ever see vulnerability being mistaken for weakness?
It shouldn't be. And I'd question that that's potentially the issue of the person seeing it as weakness than the person who's being vulnerable.
Of course.
We're all people. Everybody's living some kind of thing going on in their lives. It doesn't matter whether you're the CEO of the biggest company or the person who's picking up the phones, because everyone's got something going on in their lives. And it's impossible, in my opinion, to separate complete work to home. Like, that doesn't actually exist at all.
Of course.
I remember someone I was speaking with once, they kept saying, well, life will life, lifing is happening. And it's true. And you have to be able to navigate this. So I think vulnerability to me is going back to the courageous. If you're a courageous leader, you will show vulnerability.
Yeah.
You might get negative responses, but I think that's more their problem than it is the problem of the leader.
Yeah. And also, I think when you look at your career trajectory, you can see that those decisions that you've made have been courageous decisions, right? You've always thrown yourself into the probably not so easy, not so straightforward path.
Yeah, it would have been so much easier just to stay at Barclaycard.
Yeah, right.
It's 10 minutes down the road from me. I think that was the biggest move for me, actually, was leaving Barclaycard, where I was incredibly comfortable. I remember actually handing in my notice, and I won't say who I handed it into, but they just looked at me and they went, no, not today. And then they got up and left, and I didn't speak to them for 2 days. What do you do with that when someone tells you that? And I could have stayed there, and that would have been great because they're a great company to work for.
Yeah.
But I also would have missed out on so many other learnings.
Of course.
I wouldn't have lived in the Middle East. I wouldn't have, none of those things would have happened if I'd not taken that risk.
Put yourself outside your comfort zone.
I also speak to people all the time where they're, am I ready? Can I do it?
Yeah.
Usually it's a confidence thing, not a competence thing, as I say. And I think sometimes being brave enough and courageous enough to take those opportunities is really the most important thing, which is why I say the number one value for me in leadership is courage.
So in terms of setting high standards, right? I know this is something that we talked about previously, and I know you really focus on this when you're building your team. So practically, how do you set and maintain a high bar for people to aspire to, and then also then make sure that there's that kind of level of accountability within your organizations?
People see how you act and they mirror it, and they see it even if you don't believe they see it. And there's lots of examples I could probably give where sometimes you have to be the leader who makes the tough decisions, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Sometimes you need to roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty with everybody else to show that you're part of the team and you're there for them to succeed. And I think that I try and operate in that way. So I try and be authentic and me. Mm-hmm. I try and be vulnerable at times. It's actually not a natural, easy thing to do, to be vulnerable, but it's important because then that builds that connection with people. I give them the feedback that they need. I also praise and, lift people up also.
Right. Celebrate the little wins.
Definitely. More important than anyone thinks, to make sure that recognition is there. They know that I have an open door and then come and talk to me about anything, no judgment at any point. And I make that really clear to them that they can do that.
Yeah.
So they're the type of things that I do to try and install that in them.
What really interests me about that is it's all very personal, right? It's all very kind of individual focused. I think often people mistake setting high standards or similar as a group-wide thing, but I think it's very difficult to do anything on a group-wide basis, right? You have to do it individually, and then doing it individually creates the culture.
I think it starts with you.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot expect high standards if you don't hold yourself accountable to those same standards and live and breathe them. And that's how I always start it. And then to do that into the teams, I mean, you just tell them how it is, right? This is the expectation and this is why, and you build that culture together. You don't, people need to buy into why you're doing things.
Absolutely.
You can't just say, this is my expectation, just follow it. But I don't tend to have too much of an issue, I think, of that. I think if you act like you want people to act, people naturally start to follow that because you are the start of the culture of the office.
So true, yeah. Be careful of the shadow you cast.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that is generally what I try and do, is to act the way I want others to act.
Yeah, very good. Okay, that's really helpful from my perspective. So into the rapid fire round.
Oh, gosh.
So I would not have achieved what I have achieved in my career without...
Courage.
Excellent.
There we go.
That's very good. You had that one
answered that
on
one.
the tip of your tongue. Best decision you've ever made?
To go back to work after having the twins.
Amazing.
No, I generally believe that. I don't think there's one single best decision other than I think leaving Barclaycard, even though I loved it and was really, really comfortable there, was probably a really good decision too.
So many lessons in that, right? Pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, having the courage again, and it all pays off.
Usually.
Very good. Biggest regret?
I don't have regrets. Just learnings.
Very good. I mean, look, that's an interesting way of framing it, right? You've almost kind of flippantly put that out there, but I guess that is a mindset that has been really helpful for you as you've gone through your career.
On a daily basis, I have loads of regrets, right? Like the reality is, and that's why I couldn't name one single regret. I have hundreds of regrets if we really go down that aisle.
Yeah.
But do I sit and really beat myself up about anything particularly? No, because it's fine to get things wrong as long as you take something from it.
Yeah.
Because, and I'll get more things wrong, loads.
Yeah.
And we all will, because we're human and that's what happens.
It's a very good point. And what's the most overrated part of being a general manager?
I actually think it's a privilege role. I think it's a privilege to be able to lead a team and to be trusted to the company. But the most overrated part is probably the pressure. I actually feel very responsible for making sure people succeed.
Yeah.
And actually, it's probably not my job to purely make sure people succeed. It's my job to make sure they have the platforms to succeed. Yeah. But not, it's their jobs to make sure they succeed. And that's probably the part that I have to remember the most, is that I can't make everybody succeed, just give the platforms. But the pressure probably is the overrated thing in any of these jobs at that level is, there's, even when you're off, you're not really off. You're always thinking and your mind's going. And I think that's the overrated part, is the continuous thinking that happens.
Of course, I hear you.
It's not a 9 till 5 for sure.
No, for sure. You've got to be up for it, right?
Yeah.
To be successful in the career that you now have. And what do you love most about it?
Probably the same, actually.
That's hilarious, by the way.
It's probably true, though. What I like the most about it is the pressure, because it just drives me.
Yeah.
It drives me to always try and make sure I'm doing everything I need to do. And also the privilege of being able to help the people succeed. Generally is true. It sounds cheesy, but it's what I really like to do, is to make sure that people have the platforms to succeed.
I hear you 100%. And actually, the whole kind of concept of pressure is a privilege. That really helps me to reframe things, because otherwise you can beat yourself up, right? And you can always do more and you can always be a little bit better. But actually, and that's where my pressure comes from, is that kind of internal, I want to be the best that I can be for the people around me. Yeah. And that creates a pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think it is a privilege that someone's trusted me with this role.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love it. It's very, very cool. And one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
I don't know about myself. I probably wouldn't have listened when I was younger. But something I tell people sometimes is it's okay to slow down a little bit. And I don't mean slow down as in don't work. I mean slow down as in don't always be grabbing the next thing as soon as you've got that next role. Some of the things that I've learned the most is when I've actually been in a role for a good few years, and you learn your trade, learn what you're doing, and then you move on. I think what I saw in myself and I see in others sometimes is, I've been in the job for a year or 18 months and I need the next title.
Yeah.
Don't always chase the next title. Work really hard. Of course, find opportunities and seek them. I'm not saying just sit there and wait for it to come. It won't necessarily happen.
Of course.
But don't be afraid to spend a few years learning it and moving on, because I think, as I say, if you slow down to speed up sometimes, because actually sometimes if you jump into roles way too early, that can make it difficult and challenges that maybe you don't need to. Also, don't be afraid of feedback. I used to actually find feedback really difficult to take, and actually I still do, if we're being completely honest. I think most people do. I take it personally. I beat myself up about it, as a lot of people do. But actually, I would prefer to have shifted my mindset to be more open to that.
Yeah. Very cool. I love that. And you know what? I see that as well. The whole slow down to speed up concept. It's difficult, isn't it, to put that into practice?
And also, it's ironic that I say that, because then I spend time going, take the opportunity, don't wait too long.
Yeah.
But there is a balance.
Of course, yeah. You don't want to throw yourself into things too early consistently, where you're all of a sudden way out.
Or I think it's even that it's the chasing the job titles so it looks good on your CV, as opposed to actually learning what you need to be great at that job.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you need to know 100% either, but it does mean you need to know more than 20%.
Of course. You want to be rounded.
Yeah. I was a little too ambitious maybe at the beginning.
Well, it's all paid off, hasn't it?
In the long run. Yeah.
Look, thank you for sharing so openly with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much.